Today, we're going to be speaking about seed planting season. And I'm really, really excited for this podcast because I have someone who I've actually been following for years and years. And it's great to obviously finally connect and have this conversation with Joseph from Massive Joe's. Joseph, awesome to have you on the podcast.
Man, it's awesome to be here, Brad. We were just talking off camera a little bit, I guess, kind of how long you've been following my business and fitness journey. And I like the name of your podcast, by the way. Very similar. Mine's called the Fitness Types Business Podcast. So we're aligned in terms of how we're marketing our shows. Now, the pleasure's all mine, man. I'm excited to dive in and hopefully provide a lot of value for your audience.
We mentioned obviously when we were setting up this podcast, it's seed planting season.
Yeah.
Let's dive into sort of what you mean by like it's seed planting season and how we can sort of give some value to those people that are tuning in.
The basis of the seasons comes from Tony Robbins, right? So I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, have been for many years, listened to a lot of his content. And Tony, over the years, has spoken about the different seasons. And obviously we have the different seasons of weather, right? Like summer, autumn, winter, spring. And he kind of takes that and he applies it to, you know what, your life has different seasons. The first 20 years, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80. And then if you live over 80, that's a whole different season.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, 100%. But then he also talks about the seasons of business and in the realm of economics, which is particularly important right now. So if you think about, let's take summer, autumn, winter, spring, and let's apply it to the economic cycles because they do run in seasons as well. So what we're in right now is an economic winter, right? We have a lot of economic struggles that we're going through, and we have a lot of economic struggles ahead of us. We have rising inflation. We have consumer confidence, the lowest it's been. I think yesterday there was an article came out. It's the lowest it's been since the 80s. So we're in the winter of an economic cycle. What's going to happen? Summer, autumn, winter, spring. Things are going to get better. We're going to come into the spring of an economic cycle. Things are going to get really, really good. It's going to be summer. Things are going to start turning, not be so good. It's going to be autumn. And then in the next, usually economic cycles work in 10 to 15 year cycles. In 10 to 15 years, we're going to be back in an economic winter again. This is the cycles of the economy. So the question then is, if you know that the economy works in cycles and you know that it works loosely, you can kind of attach it to different seasons. What should you be focused on in different seasons? So if you take the analogy of farming, right? So let's take the analogy of crop farming. What do crop farmers do in winter? They're not harvesting crop. There's no crop to harvest, right? They're not cultivating crop because there's no crop to cultivate. The one thing that they do in winter is they focus on planting crop, right? They focus on planting seeds because they know that spring is just around the corner, right? And when spring, it's about cultivating the crop. It's about feeding the crop. It's about getting the crop to grow. Summer comes along, it's harvesting time, right? Let's harvest the crop. Let's make the most of these seeds that we planted in winter and the crop that we cultivated in spring. Summer is the time to make the most of it. And if you think about economic cycles, summer is when the economy's amazing, right? So let's make the most of that. And then you come back into autumn, right? So you can really kind of reap the rewards of all of the hard work that you put in winter and spring and harvesting the crop in summer and autumn. You know what? Let's just kick back. Fantastic. But know that winter's coming and winter's going to be really hard again. But winter is the time that you have to be planting seeds. So the way it applies to what we're looking at right now, and this is a message that I'm trying to communicate as much as possible to fellow business owners. It's very tempting because of how good things have been over, the last 10 years. And even specifically, we had that little blip in 2020 when the whole world shut down and then governments all over the world pumped all of this cash into the economy. And we had like this little spurt of, it's, like when you're like in the middle of winter, but you get a few sunny days and you're like, Oh shit, summer's here. It was kind of like that, right? And so it's really tempting to go, I want to harvest, and not understand that this is economic winter. And if you're trying to harvest by doing things like buying sales, by doing things like really, stupid business initiatives that are never going to pay off in terms of return on investment, you're going to be disappointed. But even more importantly, if you don't take the time to plant seeds now, you're going to miss this opportunity and it's not going to come along for the next 10 or 15 years.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. And we see it so often, people, especially in the fitness industry, you see they launch a program and they want to, get the crop out the ground straight away. It's like, well, hang on. You need to do some groundwork. You need to build your audience, do some of this planting the seeds before you can go and actually cultivate anything. Mm-hmm. And especially in like fitness businesses, like we know that winter is generally a quieter season for us.
Well, and it's funny with the seasons analogy, because in fitness, we actually go summer, autumn, winter, spring, and our business follows every year the season.
Definitely. Definitely.
We get the double whammy.
Yeah. And we've the fitness industry has, other than a little bit of COVID, but other than that, we've had a fairly good last 10 years. But I think now, especially as things start to ramp up, people are more aware of their health than they ever have been in our generation anyway. That we need to continue to plant those seeds now. Again, producing good quality content that speaks to your audience, networking really well, building relationships. So when summer does come, we've put in the work so we can go and, reap the rewards.
100%. Yeah.
So really, I suppose, so prevalent, especially in our industry, like we know it comes every year, and people people are still kicking goals in winter. Don't get me wrong. Like gyms are still going well, but know that you need to be putting in work now, knowing that summer's going to come. But also you need to plan for summer. If you're not starting now, okay, we know in summer, generally we're going to get busier. You need to start thinking now, can we cope with another 30 clients? Do we have systems in place? Do we have procedures in place, staffing, all these sorts of things? Because the farmers don't just wake up and go to crop. They've got their fuel, their machinery's just been serviced, all these sorts of things. So in our industry, what do we need to do now to make sure we're ready for when summer comes? We're ready, that our team's prepared, our systems are in place,
100%. And that's, that applies to both small cycle seasons and big cycles as well, Brad, because we're talking about like now, the time we're recording this podcast, it's August. It technically actually is winter in Australia. So we are in the season of winter, and we are a seasonal business. So we know that, when we get to September, October, November, things get really, really busy. And then December, January, it kind of dies down because people's fitness, they're more concerned with partying and Christmas and New Year's and all that. But then January comes along and it's like all systems go again, right? So there's that small cycle, but then there's also the big cycle as well, right? So we got to understand that economically, the rest of 22 is going to be economic winter. Most of 23 is going to be economic winter. Most of 24 is going to be economic winter. If you kind of look at where we're in a big economic cycle. But when 2025 comes along, things are going to get much better, right? We're going to improve. So when you take the big cycle perspective, what are you doing, not just over the next few months to prepare for the actual literal spring and summer, but what are you doing the rest of this year, next year, and the year after to prepare for all of the crop that's going to be there in 2025, 26, 27, 28, and beyond?